And we are back with another episode of the MMA Pick'ems podcast where we'll be breaking down UFC Fight Night, or UFC 269 actually. And it's a pretty stacked pay-per-view, a great pay-per-view to end the year on. We'll get to see Oliveira in his first title defense, and Muniz gets to run over another opponent. Jeff Neal, Santiago Ponzinibbio should be a banger of a fight. Garbrandt moving down to 125 should be interesting. And Sean O'Malley gets spoon-fed another matchup. So, lots of exciting fighters, exciting matchups on the card. And then the prelims look really solid as well. Josh Emmett making his return. Dominick Cruz, Pedro Munhoz, solid high-level veteran fight. So, a lot of good fights on this card. Had a lot of fun doing tape on these guys, and really excited to see how these matchups shake out. But before we get any further, I do want to run through the previous event real quick. Came through with a slight profit, but taking a look at the card, Louis Smolka, Vince Morales, and I'll be honest, I did feel a little uneasy going into this fight. I did say in my breakdown last week that Smolka could be a little shot. His chin did look a bit diminished going into this fight in previous fights, so that was a bit of a concern. I just didn't think that Morales would be able to hit him clean, but it looked like he landed an elbow in the clinch or something and just completely face-planted Smolka. And it did look like a decent enough shot, but I don't think it was hard enough to just face-plant someone. We've seen guys just eat elbows like that before, but I do feel that Smolka, his chin's probably gone at this point. I lost a unit and a half there, but moving along, Claudio Puelles, Chris Gritzmacher, did have a bet on Puelles. I did feel that the grappling path would be there for him, and then I did think that Gritzmacher had pretty subpar submission defense. So, if this was going to play out a lot on the ground, I did think that Puelles would have submission upside, and he ended up getting the knee bar there. So glad I cashed there, and it was a close fight overall, but at the end of the day, we were betting on a dog, and I did feel that Puelles had a couple paths to victory in that fight. But moving along, Alonzo Menifield, William Knight. So I was on the Menifield side, decided not to bet it because I did feel that Menifield was a bit juiced. I probably would have bet him if he was at like minus 110 before, but kind of glad that this fight got rebooked. Line got moved a bit, and fortunately dodged a bullet there. Menifield just, I guess, not that good of a fighter. Thought we'd have a bit more of an advantage on the feet, but it looked like Knight might have landed clean on Menifield a couple of times, really had his respect, and Menifield probably didn't want to overextend. So overall, still a pretty low-level fight that I'm glad I didn't get too invested in. Going forward, though, I do think that Knight is a pretty easy fade against anyone who could grapple a bit and has decent cardio, because I did feel that if Menifield had slightly better cardio, he could have had a much easier job just holding Knight against the cage or just going to the wrestling early. But Menifield just does not have the cardio to sustain a grappling heavy attack for round for more than like a round. So moving along, Cheyenne Velismas, Mallory Martin, not a fight I really had any action on either. I thought that pre-fight Martin might have been the value side, thinking that she could probably hit takedowns, but ended up not taking the shot on her, plus I think 140 wasn't really good enough. And at the end of the day, Martin's just not really a good fighter. Going into this fight, 7-4, 7-5 now, who's really just a pretty mediocre fighter. On the feet, she's got decent offensive boxing, but, it's not great, and she's super hittable. So, I knew Baze would probably have a pretty sizable advantage on the feet. And Martin wasn't even able to get her wrestling going this fight. So, she lost a pretty clear decision, in my opinion. Baze looked good. Her offensive striking looked good. Was a little hittable. Getting into a banger with Martin, not really a great look, but, Baze does have a lot of intangibles. So I do think that she'll have a bit of success in this division. But moving along, Brian Barberena, Darian Weeks didn't really have an opportunity to dive deep into this fight. I did feel Barberena was probably going to be the side. I mean, he was getting pretty close to pick'ems come fight night, and I was really tempted to take a bet here because Weeks coming in short notice. Super green up against someone like Barberena, who's a vet at this point, had a full training camp. I didn't really think that Barberena was washed to the point where someone 5-0 could just come in and beat him, but that was still a pretty damn competitive fight, and Barberena against his next opponent could be in a bit of trouble. But moving along, Cap versus Zumagulov. So Cap was the biggest play I had on the card, 6-unit bet on him. Was pretty confident he'd win, and not much to really recap here. I did say that I felt Cap was just the far superior striker. Really, the only concern with him was the volume, but I just felt that against a lower level striker in Zumagulov, he'd be able to counter him pretty well, be able to come out of the exchanges ahead, even if he might be out-volumed a little bit, but Cap just the much crisper, cleaner striker in there, was able to catch Zumagulov, looked like the big favorite that he was supposed to be. And even up until that point, I did feel he was winning a lot of these exchanges, so I do believe even if he hadn't gotten the knockout, as the fight progressed, he'd be able to get his timing down much better and be able to just start teeing off on Zumagulov, but didn't really have to get there. Cap showing that it's just a level ahead in the striking, but moving along. Maki Pitolo, Desko Todorovic, dropped a unit on Pitolo, and what can I really say here? I mean, the guy jumped guillotine in a fight that, he was winning pretty soundly on the feet, so, very poor display of fight IQ there. But can't really say I'm surprised. I've always said that Pitolo just finds a way to lose. Got sucked in by the dog price, but overall, glad I probably won't have to lose any more money betting Pitolo, because he's probably going to be getting the old snip snap there. But moving along into the main card, we have Alex Morono, Mickey Gall. Thought Gall might have been the value side. Was really happy to see how wrong I was. Turns out, getting one win over Jordan Williams made us all think that Gall might have a bit of potential. But we get to see good old fashioned Mickey Gall performance here. And in hindsight, Morono was definitely the side. I guess I was just a little put off by having to lay the juice on him. But ultimately, the guy is a UFC veteran at this point. He's a very well-rounded fighter, whereas Gall really is still just a meme fighter at this point. So can't say I was really surprised by that outcome there. But moving along, Brendan Allen, Chris Curtis. Didn't have any action on this side. I did say I felt Allen was a little too big of a favorite for someone who is as confident in his hands as he is, despite having, very terrible, striking defense. He's just way too reliant on his chin. And, he's taken so much unnecessary damage because he could just take this fight to the ground and probably have a pretty dominant performance there. But, this is twice now he's decided to just stand and bang with his opponents. Both of his opponents who were, far better strikers than him. These fights that he could have had a much better chance in if he had looked to go to the grappling a bit and saved himself a lot of potential damage. So a little concerning for Allen. Hope he shores up that part of his game going forward. And Curtis, 2 highlight reel knockouts coming into the UFC now. So definitely going to be riding a little bit of hype moving forward. And I'll be really interested to see who he gets matched up with in his next fight. And then moving along, Clay Guida, Leonardo Santos. I ended up putting a unit bet on Guida. Also took a small play on him to win via decision. Obviously, I did not expect Santos to just completely unload the gas tank on Guida early. I thought this fight would kind of get dragged into the later rounds. Guida would, go to his wrestling a bit, do a bit of striking and, just win a very close, greasy sort of decision. I didn't think that Santos would just blow his load and get submitted in the second round, a la Rodolfo Vieira. But a crazy comeback for Guida. I know some people are saying that, the possible late stoppage there. And I'm definitely going to sound a little biased here because, I did have action on Guida, but I felt that Guida was doing a pretty good job defending himself early. He was working on a single, and anytime Peterson stepped in to, tell him to defend himself, Guida was working a bit to defend himself. He was definitely hurt, pretty bad, but seeing the rest of the fight unfold, I don't think it was a bad non-stoppage. I wouldn't argue it being stopped either, but, I just don't think that it was a really bad non-stoppage or anything. But Guida just has next level conditioning and durability. I mean, the guy was out there hopping around like nothing happened after eating non-stop shots from Santos for 2 minutes. And I knew the fight was over then. I mean, Santos looked like a zombie in there, and Guida's out there breakdancing, so knew it was only a matter of time at that point the fight was going to end. So didn't cash on the decision prop, but happy that Clay got the win there. And then moving along, Jimmy Crute, Jamal Hill, ended up taking a small stab on Hill there. I just felt that, if this fight was going to play out on the feet, Hill would have a pretty significant advantage. Crute, his best path to victory was to take Hill down and probably get the submission, which is what I, hedged with as well. But Hill showing that, he was just a level ahead on the feet. But moving along, Brad Riddell, Rafael Fiziev. So yeah, took a small 1-unit shot on Fiziev. I just felt that he was the way more explosive striker in there, and that definitely showed. Fiziev also had a pretty significant speed advantage, it looked like. Well, maybe not significant, but, it did look like he had a decent, speed advantage. He was able to counter Riddell really well. He saw a lot of what Riddell was throwing. I mean, Fiziev was getting tagged up. Riddell definitely was landing shots, but, overall, Fiziev looked like he was landing the much harder, cleaner shots. He had a lot more of the action shots, which, I did say that I felt he would have had. And, I did think he banked 2 rounds pretty well. I also hedged with a small Riddell in round 3 in case Fiziev started to slow dramatically and we start to see Riddell pick it up. But Fiziev, he put on a really solid pace. He didn't go too hard the first 2 rounds, I don't think. It looked like both guys were a little more measured in there. Definitely respected the power coming from both sides there. So it ended up being a lower paced fight. Still a lot of action, but not the sort of pace that Fiziev was throwing in the green fight. So Fiziev didn't really look like he slowed down as much and ended up getting the finish himself. So Fiziev looking super legit in there. And then not a bad loss for Riddell either, aside from the fact that he probably took a ton of damage. But in terms of his stock, I definitely think it went up. He fought really competitively in there. Fiziev definitely looked like he was winning, but he was hitting Fiziev pretty clean too. So Riddell, I think, is going to have a pretty solid bounce back fight after this, when he recovers. But lastly, we have the main event. Rob Font, Jose Aldo ended up taking a shot on Font. Decided to take a small bet on Font to win in round 4 and round 5 as well. Obviously, the take here was that Aldo slows later in the fight, and I just felt that Font would probably win the last 2 rounds, and then if he was able to steal one of the first 3 rounds, he'd either win a decision or maybe get a late stoppage on Aldo. But one thing I just completely misread was how big of an athleticism and size advantage that Aldo had in that fight. I mean, I did mention that Aldo is a pretty big bantamweight last week, and I did also say that the measurables for Font weren't actually that much in his favor. So I just thought the size would be comparable and that there wouldn't be a massive edge either way. But as it turns out, Aldo looking like an absolute unit in there. I mean, he made Font look pretty fucking small in there. And when Font sizes up with other bantamweights, he seems big. But next to Aldo, he looked pretty fucking small. But yeah, overall, I just think that the size and the athleticism advantage that Aldo had was just way too big here. Because Font, he was touching Aldo up for most of the fight. But anytime Aldo would unload on Font, he'd hurt him pretty noticeably. He'd either drop him or make him wobble a bit with the leg kicks. And even an Aldo that had slowed down as much as he did was able to still hurt Font. And Aldo was slowing down pretty quickly after that 3rd round. After their first grappling exchange, Aldo looked noticeably slower, noticeably more fatigued. But Font just didn't really have the power to really shut Aldo down, and Aldo was just able to kind of use his strength a bit to stay on top of Font and maintain a lot of control time, rest up a little bit as well. So Aldo definitely showed a good veteran savvy there, but Font, I think, came in with a good game plan. He was trying to do what Max did, just pressure Aldo early and look to break him early before he could really get going. But the big difference between the two is that Max Holloway's got a legendary chin, and Font, he's definitely durable as well. I mean, he was eating some bombs against Aldo, but he doesn't have that Max Holloway chin where he can just eat those bombs and keep moving forward. Anytime Font got hurt, he had to shell up a bit, he had to back off a bit, and that gave plenty of opportunities for Aldo to get into the fight. And then, of course, Holloway's just a much bigger opponent, so the shots he's going to be landing are definitely going to be a lot harder than the shots that Font are going to be landing. So overall, still a really great performance by both guys, honestly. And, Aldo, definitely, concerned about him moving forward, going into the later rounds still. Font wasn't able to fully take advantage of it, but I do think against some of the other heavier hitters in the division, he could be in a bit of trouble. So, really good fight overall. Really fun card, honestly. Definitely a big step up from the previous Fight Night card. But without further ado, let's get into UFC 269, which is looking like a pretty loaded card as well. And in the next fight, we have Priscila Cachoeira versus Gillian Robertson. And Robertson's the minus 340 favorite. Come back on. Cachoeira is plus 300. So we'll take a look at the underdog in Cachoeira first. So yeah, pretty low level fighter here. Likes to just move forward, march opponents down, look to pressure them, just get in their face and throw down. Honestly, she's got decent power, but she's super hittable. And it wasn't too long ago she was just memed for being a walking punching bag. She's super flat-footed. Is honestly pretty stiff. But again, she is super durable and will constantly look to move forward. So overall, that can get you kind of far in women's MMA, but once you get to a certain level, fighters should just be able to maintain distance and just pick her apart at distance. So that's kind of been happening at the UFC level. She's gotten a couple of wins, but it doesn't discount the fact that she was just getting touched up by all her previous opponents. And, I do want to note her 2 most recent wins are against Gina Mazzani and Shanna Dobson, 2 of the worst fighters in the division. So, good for her for getting those wins, but, not wins that I put too much stock in. And furthermore, I think that the takedown defense of Cachoeira is pretty damn suspicious. McCann was able to take her down. He didn't even reverse Cachoeira on the ground. And McCann, I don't think, is that good of a grappler. She is someone who has shown she can wrestle a bit, but I don't even think her wrestling's that great either. And then, from what I've seen of Cachoeira off her back, she's not really that good there either, which is a big concern, especially since she'll be going up against Gillian Robertson, who is primarily a grappler. She's generally looking to get the fight to the ground as soon as possible. Her striking is honestly pretty awkward. Really doesn't seem all that comfortable there. Doesn't seem like she's able to throw a punch really well, if I'm being honest. Yeah, she just doesn't seem like she's very dangerous on the feet whatsoever. But, she is generally pretty good at looking to get the fight into the grappling realm. Her wrestling is okay, but, she's got very solid jiu-jitsu. She can smother opponents on top. She's someone who will look to hunt subs and has recently focused a little more on control positions over, just hunting the submission. So I like Robertson here, honestly. I think that she's got a pretty significant advantage on the ground. The real question is, if she's going to be able to get the fight there, how quickly she can get it there, and how long she could keep Cachoeira on the ground. Because on the feet, I do think that while Cachoeira is kind of basic, she is going to be the more aggressive, more impactful striker. So, Robertson's can't really afford to keep this fight standing for too long. She should look to get this fight to the ground really as soon as possible and look to abuse the ground game of Cachoeira. But, I do feel that if this fight does get to the ground, I think that the sub is very live for Robertson. It's been a while since she's gotten a submission. And at one point, she was considered, one of the better, I guess, submission grapplers in the division. She had a really high finish rate and, it's been a while. She's had a very disappointing run her last few fights, but I do still think that she's got solid grappling, and I think that Cachoeira is going to be a good opponent for Robertson to really bounce back and show off her grappling abilities once again. But I do have to say Robertson, I've noticed, has struggled against more physical fighters, bigger physical fighters, and I do think that Cachoeira is pretty big and physical, so. If Cachoeira is somehow able to get this fight or keep this fight standing, she could steal a decision here. But I just don't think that Cachoeira is that good. I think Robertson, if she's aggressive, will eventually get the fight to the ground. And once that happens, I do think the round is over. So yeah, I got to go with Robertson here. I honestly just don't think that Cachoeira is UFC caliber at all. And honestly, if Robertson loses to Cachoeira here, I think she gets cut because you really shouldn't be losing to Cachoeira. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Robertson. I might look to put her in a parlay. I'm not sure. Her number is pretty big. I definitely wouldn't recommend playing her straight, but I really do think that Robertson should win this. Yeah, Cachoeira is just not that good, so I'll go with Robertson. I think she gets it done via decision or submission. And in the next fight, we have a banger between Randy Costa and Tony Kelley. Costa is going to be the minus 200 favorite. Comeback on Kelley is plus 170. And we'll start with Costa first. So, the guy's a very good offensive striker, very high octane in there, very explosive, very high output, very slick striking. I mean, the guy's just super dangerous in that first round. Seriously looks like a world beater in there. But, of course, the issue is that he's only good for about 3.5, 4 minutes before he just completely hits a wall. And, we've seen it with all of his performances where, the guy looks fantastic early, lots of early finishes. Even in the fights that he eventually loses, he looks fantastic in the first round. Against Brandon Davis, he's doing damage. And then against Yanez, he's doing work against Yanez as well. He's piecing him up, making me really sweat the bet I had on Yanez in that fight. But, once that 3.5, 4 minute mark passes by, though, the guy just completely starts to fall apart. And, in both those fights, you start to see his opponents start to get their way or claw their way back into the fight. Even in the Yanez fight, we see Yanez start to get his reads in, and then we start to see Costa start to slow down late into that first round. And then, that second round, he starts to just completely fall apart. And I don't even know if anyone's really surprised by this, because the way Costa fights is just extremely unsustainable. The guy pushes a crazy pace in that first round. Costa landed 57 significant strikes against Yanez in that first round. Some fighters don't even land 57 strikes over the course of 3 rounds. So, you have to imagine, with the amount of output and power that Costa's putting into each shot, that, it's not going to be able to sustain that over the course of 3 rounds. So, naturally he's going to slow down, and his body eventually just shuts down from the output that he's throwing. Just watch those Davis and Yanez fights. His body literally shuts down in that second round. Like, he just completely folds in there and has pretty much nothing left. And that's going to be really concerning if you're looking to bet Costa here, because, the guy's super dangerous, but, he's really only dangerous in that first round. If you're able to weather that storm, he's kind of fucked in there. And, he's going to be going up against Tony Kelley, which not too much to work with for this guy. Really only one pre-UFC footage that I was able to find, extensive tape on him, and that was his war that he had with Aguilar on the regionals about 5 years ago. But, since then, he's taken a long layoff, beats a scrub, and then comes into the UFC and makes his UFC debut against Kai Kamaka, which was a war in that fight too. So basically, what we know about this guy is, he's super durable. He's got a ton of heart, and he could go 3 hard rounds. He's shown he could go 5 hard rounds. So the guy's super durable. He's got tremendous cardio in there, which really is all you're looking for if you're looking to fade Costa, right? So, I kind of like Kelley's odds in here. I think that should Kelley be able to weather that first round from Costa, he should be good. He should be able to find the finish on Costa, if not win, rounds 2, rounds 3 really dominantly. But I don't know if this fight's going to the scorecards, just with the way Costa fights. He puts so much into that first round that there's no way he could continue to fight an extra 2 rounds after that first round. So I'm going to go with Kelley here. He's shown tremendous heart and durability. I'm going to trust him to maybe weather that first round and then look to just pour it on Costa in that second round. So the pick for me is Kelley. I'm going to take him to win in the second round, like I did. When I took Yanez to win in the second round as well. And I'm probably going to keep playing this angle until Costa's shown that he's evolved beyond that. But yeah, look, Costa is still very dangerous in that first round, right? Like, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he just starches Kelley early. So maybe I'll play Costa round 1, knockout, and then play Kelley round 2. So that's probably what I'm going to do. But as far as an official picks go, I think I'm just going to go with Tony Kelley to win in the second round. And moving along, we have Darrick Minner versus Ryan Hall. So Hall's going to be the minus 205 favorite, come back on. Minner is plus 175. So this fight, very interesting. We have a grappler versus grappler. 2 guys who are, I'd say, pretty solid submission specialists. And, that's what makes this fight really interesting and kind of hard to break down. As far as what both guys bring to the table, I think it's pretty straightforward. With Minner, he's primarily round 1 sub or bust. Most of this guy's win equity is tied up in that first round. He comes out there very aggressive, very strong in that first round. Will look for the submission early, and if he doesn't get it, he definitely will fade. I believe I did fade him in his last fight against Elkins, and even took the round props against him, because with Minner, you really know what the deal is. Like, he's going to come out in that first round, find the submission. If that doesn't work, then he's just going to fade and get choked out, most likely. It's starting to look like that Rosa fight was a bit of an anomaly. But by and large, I do think that Minner's going to be the type of fighter that's going to stick to that sort of game plan. It's what he does. I don't think he's going to deviate from it. He's too late in his career to be changing things up drastically. I know he's fighting at Glory MMA and Fitness, but the same thing just happened again against Elkins. So I really don't think the guy's making like crazy improvements in there. The guy had one good performance against Rosa. Until he's shown that he can continuously do this, I'm just going to stick with the narrative that Minner's round 1 sub or bust. So I think that's pretty straightforward in that regards. But he'll be going up against Ryan Hall, who is a pretty high level submission guy himself. His offensive striking is honestly a bit limited. He's kind of just out there throwing spinning attacks, and then he'll look for Imanari rolls and stuff to get the fight to the ground. But fortunately for him, I don't know, or I don't think that he'll really have to make an effort to get this fight to the ground, because Minner's going to look to get this fight to the ground pretty early. So I have a feeling Hall's going to accept the takedowns, and that's where things get a little bit dicey here, because I do think that Minner, he's pretty dangerous early, but Hall, very high level black belt in there. Don't know if Minner's going to be able to get the submission. But here's where things get a little tricky is, if Hall's going to be someone who's, attacking submissions off his back, if he's going to look to sweep, what's Hall going to do when Minner's on top of him? Is Minner going to aggressively hunt submissions, or is he going to, do what he did against Rosa and just lay on top of Hall for extended periods? It's really hard to say. This fight, I think, is a very high variance fight. I know it's kind of straightforward on paper. I generally like to fade Minner, going late into fights, but we haven't really seen too much in terms of like defensive grappling from Hall. Is he someone who will play off his back? And if he will Minner just kind of lay on top of Hall, look to stay safe, go chest to chest, and kind of just a true control time like he did against Rosa, not really be aggressive with the submissions. I do think that, if that happens, Hall could potentially lose a decision here, but, I don't know if Minner's going to want to take Hall down. This is, it's a straightforward fight on paper, but, I just don't know how these guys are going to game plan going into this fight. And I guess what's stumping me the most really is how Minner's going to approach this fight. Like, I don't know if he's going to look to even maybe get his grappling game going early, because, maybe he's afraid of the jiu-jitsu of Hall. Maybe he just wants to keep this fight standing, in which case, that kind of plays into Hall's hand a little bit as well, because if you don't take him down, Hall's just going to spam spinning attacks, and I don't think the stand-up of Minner is that good. So I think that if he doesn't take Hall down, Hall could potentially outpoint him like he did against Gray Menard a little while back, and to a certain extent, Darren Elkins. But yeah, it's just such a weird fight. But if I had to really take a side here, I think I'm going to go with Hall. I just don't know if Minner's going to be able to submit Hall. And, if he goes too aggressively early like he always does, he's probably going to get fade and get submitted later in the fight. If he doesn't take Hall down, Hall's probably just going to, keep this fight at distance and just kind of outpoint him, outwork him. So, I guess it's a kind of a tough fight for Minner, but it'll really depend on what his game plan is. So for this fight, I guess I'll go with Hall. I don't really recommend laying the juice on him, especially since we just saw him get knocked out in his most recent fight, and I do feel there is a bit of a blueprint for getting him out of there. Like, the guy leaves a lot of openings when he's going for those Imanari rolls, and Poirier was able to capitalize, so maybe Minner is able to take a page out of that, and when Hall's just rolling around in there, just fucking slam some hammer fists on him or something. Obviously much easier said than done, but I do think that there is a bit of a blueprint to beat Hall out there. So I'm still going to go with Hall. I think that, stylistically he does have some advantages, but not super confident in betting him in this fight. And moving along, we have Alex Perez versus Matt Schnell, and Perez is the minus 310 favorite comeback on. Schnell is plus 260. So we'll take a look at Perez first, who's coming off of about a year-long layoff after his title challenge against Figueiredo. So, he's a very solid, well-rounded fighter. He's got, decent boxing on the feet. He's got good output. He's got very heavy leg kicks as well. And, of course, he could wrestle as well, which I do believe that's his base. So, the guy's a very solid, well-rounded fighter, could do a little bit of everything. His chin might be a little suspect, but outside of that, which I don't even think is that big of a deal at this point, I don't think he's got any overwhelming weaknesses. But I don't think Perez is like elite anywhere. But he's just very good, very well rounded. His opponent Schnell, on the other hand, I do consider someone who is a pretty weak chin. He's definitely one of the more chinny guys in the division. I believe he's more of a submission guy, but I do think that his striking is pretty solid. I think that, he's got a lot of pop on his shots. He's got good combination punching. The guy's fearless in there, man. Like, with the amount of times he's been knocked out, he still decides to just look to trade in the pocket with someone like Pantoja. Much respect to him. Suspect fight IQ, but a lot of respect to him for doing that. But like I was saying before, I do think that, his base is probably in jiu-jitsu. Don't quote me on that, though. It does look like he is someone who's comfortable off his back. He will look to jump guillotine or pull guard. So, he's very comfortable attacking submissions off his back. Not a fan of his fight IQ, though, in regards to that. Or the fact that he'll look to just brawl in the pocket despite having a pretty weak chin. So, the guy's fight IQ, definitely a bit questionable, but I do think that he's a pretty skilled fighter. But taking a look at this matchup, I definitely do have to favor Perez here. I think he's just got more minute-winning capabilities. On the feet, I think that it should be pretty even, but, I do like the output of Perez a little more. I like his leg kicks. I like the attritional work that he does. And then, of course, he can mix in the wrestling as well. So, if the fight's not going his way on the feet, he could hit a takedown, get a bit of control time. But, I definitely do feel the line is wide because, I don't think Perez is that good. And really, I don't think that Schnell is that bad. So the line does feel a little wide. But, to elaborate on a little bit, like I was saying before, I think the striking exchange is probably pretty even. Schnell is no slouch on the feet. He could definitely crack. So, I do think that Schnell can hold his own on the feet. The real issue is just how willing Schnell is to attack submissions off his back, play off his back. But even then, he still is, I think, a pretty legit submission grappler off his back. So, if Perez is careless with his takedowns, if he's kind of sloppy with his ground and pound, I do think that Schnell, he could find a submission in there. He's got a very tight guillotine, and he's got a very sneaky triangle choke as well. So, if Perez isn't safe, or if he is not careful, he could definitely get caught by Schnell. So, for those reasons, I don't think that Perez should be that big of a favorite, just because I think that on the feet, Schnell is dangerous. And then on the ground, he's dangerous also. So, Perez, for the majority of this fight, should be winning unless he gets caught, which, I think is definitely something that could happen. But overall, I do favor Perez a little more to be just winning minutes. But again, him getting caught, I wouldn't be surprised. So I'll go with Perez here, but I just don't think he should be that big of a favorite. I think that, if you are looking to take Schnell, though, maybe look to take him inside the distance because, the kid's got some power and he's definitely dangerous on the mat. But overall, I think I'm going to take Perez here. I think Perez should be able to get a close decision victory here. It'll really depend on how aggressively he attacks the wrestling and how aggressively he's looking for the ground and pound, or if he's just looking to secure control time, look to just lay on top of Schnell and just play that game. So I'm going to go with Perez here. I think he wins via decision. And moving along, we have Erin Blanchfield versus Miranda Maverick, and Maverick's the minus 148 favorite. Comeback on Blanchfield is plus 128. And, very interesting prospect fight here. Both bring a pretty similar skill set here to this matchup. Both I would consider primarily grapplers, but, their striking is starting to come along a bit. Both very early in their careers. So, very interesting to see how this fight plays out. But, taking a look at Blanchfield here first, like I said before, primarily a grappler. Striking, definitely a work in progress, a little janky in there. But, she is pretty reliable to get to her grappling. She will look for the single leg and trips against the fence. She's usually looking to advance positions, just threatening subs in there. Just put on an absolute clinic against Alpar in their most recent fight. Granted, Alpar, not UFC caliber, so not sure if you can take too much from that, but, it was a pretty solid performance on Blanchfield's part. She's shown decent takedown defense so far, but, it looks like Blanchfield is someone who is somewhat comfortable off her back. We saw that in her Cortez fight where she was pretty content with just attacking submissions off her back. Although, do you have to consider that fight was a little while ago and, Blanchfield's still extremely young in her career and she could have made improvements since then. It's been like nearly 2 years, but, Blanchfield overall is still extremely young in her career. So I don't know how much improvements she's made, since then, but, that is still a little bit of a concern. But overall, I do think she's a very solid offensive grappler. She's got decent cardio as well, can go 3 hard rounds. So yeah, I do think she's a decent prospect, and she'll be going up against Maverick, who's a pretty solid prospect as well. Also a grappler. Offensively, I do think that the striking of Maverick's a bit better, but defensively, Maverick is super hittable in there. But again, Maverick is someone who is like Blanchfield, pretty reliable to go to the grappling. She's very physically strong in there. She was able to have quite a bit of grappling success against Robertson, who I do think is a good grappler. And, she was pretty solid on Invicta as well. She was pretty reliable to go to the grappling. I won her a lot of fights there. So, yeah, this is a very interesting matchup because they do match up pretty well. But, if I had to pick a side here, I definitely do think that Maverick is the side. And I do think the betting markets have started to wisen up to it a little bit. We're starting to see the line widen up a bit. Last I checked, it looked like Maverick was about a minus 120-ish favorite, and it's starting to open up. And I can't disagree with the line movement here, because on the feet, I think that Maverick is probably the better offensive striker. I don't think it's by like a wide margin or anything, but we have seen Maverick strike for extended periods, and it doesn't look bad. She's just kind of hittable, honestly, but that's a big equalizer, because no matter how good you are offensively, if you're super hittable, you always leave openings for the fight to be close. So I do favor the offensive striking of Maverick a little bit more, but with how hittable she is, the fight's probably going to be pretty close on the feet. And when it comes to the grappling, I think both are probably around the same level, but I do favor the physicality of Maverick a little bit more. Going into this fight, I thought Maverick would be the bigger fighter, but it does look like Blanchfield's probably got the bigger frame. But I do think that Maverick's overall probably the better athlete. She definitely looks like the more well-muscled fighter, whereas with Blanchfield, not that she's like out of shape or anything, but it does look like she's got a little bit of baby fat on her still, whereas with Maverick, she definitely looks a lot more muscular, I guess. So in a lot of these exchanges, I think that the physicality of Maverick might be able to win her a lot of these grappling exchanges. She might be able to get a little more control time off. Maybe, she's able to reverse and sweep Blanchfield, just based off of her being probably the more physical fighter. So for that reason, I do have to favor Maverick here. I wouldn't favor her largely because I do think that Blanchfield, she could be able to get off, some control time as well and potentially win the fight that way. So I definitely do feel that Maverick, should be a slight to maybe moderate favorite here. And it definitely looks like the line's trending that way. So, if you're looking to play Maverick, I'd say play her now, because I do feel the line might wind up a bit more during fight week. But yeah, the pick here is going to be Maverick for me. I think she's just a little bit better offensively in terms of striking. And then I do think she might be able to outmuscle Blanchfield in a lot of these grappling exchanges. So yeah, give me Maverick to win, and I'll have her winning via decision. And moving right along, we have André Muniz versus Eryk Anders. And Muniz is the minus 140 favorite. Comeback on Anders is plus 120. So I think this is a pretty straightforward fight to break down. We have, I think, your typical, striker versus grappler. Anders he's a pretty well-rounded fighter, honestly, but I do classify him more as a striker, whereas with Muniz, he's definitely, I'd say, more of a submission guy. His stand-up is, I'd say, pretty subpar. It's pretty limited, but I do think a lot of Muniz's win equity is going to be tied up in hitting takedowns and getting a bit of control time, but mainly finding the submission here. But yeah, we'll take a look at Muniz first. Muniz, primarily a jiu-jitsu guy. He's very slick on the ground, very dangerous there. I mean, the guy fucking snapped Jacare's arm, so, very impressive there. I know a lot of people were saying he wasn't going to be able to submit Jacare either, and the guy fucking snapped his arm, so... super dangerous on the ground, but, striking definitely a bit subpar, very low volume there, very basic. He's got some, snapping kicks, but, he doesn't really have much to offer. But if he is able to get this fight to the ground, he's super dangerous there and is very live to get the submission. But he'll be going up against Anders, who, like I said before, he's shown that he could do a little bit of everything. On the feet, he could strike a bit. He could work in the clinch. He could wall install, but he's shown that he could hit takedowns as well. So Anders could do a little bit of everything, but he has shown that, he prefers to generally, look to stand and fight with his opponents. And supposedly we've seen a new and improved Anders, but, we do have to consider that really we've only had a one fight sample. Well, two fights, but it's against the same opponent in Stewart. And it is Darren Stewart we're talking about, who's probably on his way out. And the guy's, I think, on a pretty big downtrend right now. That first fight, he looked good. But that second fight, it was, largely just a wall install sort of fight. So, yeah, he got those wins. But I don't know if we're seeing like a crazy improved Anders right here. But, it is undeniable. He got those 2 wins. He got that win over Stewart. And he looked, pretty decent doing it. So, I'm not going to completely write him off. I'm not going to, hate on him too much there. He did get the win. But I do feel overall Anders is still a pretty inconsistent fighter. I'm not going to let, 1.5 performances change that. The guy was, fighting pretty competitively on the feet against, GM3, who is primarily a grappler. He looked completely lost on the feet against Roundtree. Just got pieced up that whole fight, got dropped a couple of times. Just really had no answer for Roundtree in that whole fight. The guy just looked like, he seriously looked just very lost out there. But hopefully, Anders did actually make some improvements. He's at fight ready, a solid camp. So, hope he's, fully prepared for this fight. I do think that this is probably going to be a somewhat binary fight. I think that on the feet, Anders should be able to win. I've seen crazier things, though, so I don't know if, Anders is a lock to win the striking exchanges. But I do think he should be able to get the better of Muniz in most of the striking exchanges. But, of course, if Muniz is able to get Anders down, Anders could be in a lot of trouble. We haven't really seen the defensive grappling or the submission defense of Anders. He did fight a couple submission grapplers in GM3 and Moreira, but those guys weren't able to get him down, and the fight never really took place in the grappling department. That it was primarily a striking fight. He basically fought 2 grapplers on the feet, and he had success there. So we don't really know what's going to happen here if Muniz is able to get Anders down, but I do have a feeling that if Muniz is able to get Anders down, he's probably going to find the submission. I don't think that Anders' defensive grappling or submission defense is up to snuff here, even though we don't have a lot of tape. I do feel that Muniz has probably got a pretty sizable advantage there. But I do think that if Anders is able to keep this fight standing, he could win a pretty dominant decision. I think he might even be able to get the knockout too. Muniz is someone who does slow down, and if Muniz is attacking the grappling aggressively and he isn't able to get Anders down, he's probably going to use a lot of energy. And Anders is someone who I think has decent cardio, so if he's able to shuck off those takedowns, keep the fight standing, he might be able to just do enough attritional damage on Muniz to finish him, maybe late in that second round or even in that third round. So I think I'm going to go with Anders to win this fight. I don't know at what clip Muniz is going to be hitting takedowns, finding the submission. So I'm gonna take Anders there. I think he should be able to keep the fight standing, do enough to win to win a decision or even get a late finisher. So I like Anders here, but of course Muniz could just take him down and submit him. That is very live. But as far as an official pick, I'm gonna go with Anders to win via decision. And in the next fight, we have Bruno Silva versus Jordan Wright. And Silva's going to be the minus 350 favorite. Comeback on Wright is plus 240 or 285. We'll take a look at Silva first. Not too much to say about this guy. I just don't know if I have the best read on him, honestly. He looks like one of these fighters who's got a lot of flaws, but, every time I tried to fade him, he just somehow is able to pull a win out of his ass here. So, I don't have the greatest read on Silva, but, he is someone who is very heavy-handed. I consider him to be a bit of a pressure-style sort of fighter. But, his takedown defense isn't that great. His bottom game's not that great. But, somehow he's able to get out from under these positions. He's able to kind of make his opponents really work and then end up finishing them late in the fight. He did that against Sanchez. Sanchez historically is someone who does fade, though. But, Silva, he did also do the same thing against Frolov as well. So, he is someone who is, I think, pretty dangerous. He was able to finish Turman as well early in the fight. Turman took him down, but, Silva was able to reverse. And on top, Silva's super dangerous. He's got very heavy hands, very nasty ground and pound. The guy just somehow is able to pull wins out of his ass. I mean, I don't know how he does it. I don't know how his opponents keep letting him get away with these sort of things. But, I don't know if I want to look to fade Silva here. He's a dangerous fighter, man. I just don't know what else to say about him. He's going to be going up against Jordan Wright, who, does look like a pretty dangerous fighter himself. The guy for sure has got, some finishing instinct. He's got some power, but I'm still not sold on him, man. I still think that Jordan Wright still is a bit of a fraud. I said this before the Pickett fight, and I still think it's true to a certain extent. I think that Wright's really only beaten cans, and he's shown that he starts strong. He's got a very good first round, but I do think that if you're able to weather that storm, or if you're able to pressure Wright, I do think that Wright will crumble. We saw it a couple of times already. Buckley and Hernandez were able to kind of pressure him early and just break Jordan Wright. And, I do feel that Wright, when he faces adversity, is going to kind of wilt in there. All of his other finishes have been relatively early. I don't think the guys does well against adversity. And, Silva's definitely one of these guys who's going to look to get in the face of Wright and look to just put it on him. So I really like Silva here. I think that he should be able to get it done, but I don't think you should underestimate Wright here. Like, even though I don't think Wright's that good, he does seem to be a pretty, dangerous offensive striker. He does look like he's got some power. So if Silva doesn't respect the power of Wright, he could find himself, getting caught, getting put out. So, I think if Silva pressures him, in a measured way, I do think that Silva could eventually overwhelm Wright. And, I do feel that should the fight get extended, I do favor Silva maybe a little bit more. I'm not completely sold on the cardio of Silva. He just seems to be one of these guys who, is able to kind of just hang in there, make his opponents work, and then once they start tiring out, he'll start to pour it on them. I don't know if that's the best strategy against Wright. I don't know if you want to let Wright start to get going. I think against Wright, you're really going to have to put the pressure on him. So I like Silva here. I like him to get the win. I think Silva probably gets it done in the second round here. I don't know if I want to lay the juice on Silva, though. He is someone who I think isn't the fastest starter. And against Wright, I do think you have to pressure him early. You really have to get to him. So I think that's the best game plan for Silva here. But, if he lets Wright get going, he could potentially get put out here because Wright, is pretty dangerous offensively. So I'm going to go with Silva. I think he gets it done again, round 2, but I don't know if I want to lay the juice on Silva at this point. He's pretty juiced favorite. And, while I do favor him to finish, I don't think that he finishes at this high of a clip. I think if you want to take Silva, maybe just play him inside the distance. I think the under is probably not a bad look. Fight doesn't go to decision is probably a good look. Both guys are big-time finishers. Wright, definitely a kill or be killed sort of guy. So I do think there's a decent chance this fight doesn't go the distance. But as far as a pure pick goes, I'm going to go with Silva. I think he knocks out Wright in the second round. And moving along, we have two big-bellied heavyweights going at it. Tuivasa, Augusto Sakai. We're going to see a lot of jiggling in this fight. It's a pick-em fight -110 both ways. We'll take a look at Tuivasa first. The guy's pretty exclusively a striker in there, a little one-dimensional and predictable in that regard. He's got pretty heavy hands. He's got a really nice inside leg kick that he likes to slam. He is someone who will look to work in the clinch, push his opponents up against the cage as well. But overall, he is primarily a striker. His takedown defense is okay, I guess. It's not terrible, but, against anyone who's wanted to take him down, any grappler that's wanted to take him down, they've been able to do so and have had, decent success doing so. He was finished against Spivak, but, prior to that, he was working his way up a few times. Not sure why I really went into that. I don't think there's going to be any grappling going on into this fight. I think this is probably going to just be a stand-up affair. Sakai, has got pretty shitty takedown defense himself and hasn't really shown to be hitting offensive takedowns as well. So I do think this fight is going to be standing. But yeah, going back to Tuivasa real quick, Tuivasa, he's shown that he's generally pretty tough. He ate a bomb from Hardy his last fight. They were just brawling in the pocket, and he was able to eventually catch Hardy early in that fight. So Tuivasa, definitely a pretty durable dude. He's got a lot of power too. So, he is pretty dangerous offensively, but I don't think he's a super high level striker or anything. But overall, he is pretty dangerous. He's shown decent cardio and decent durability. So this should be a pretty fun fight. Sakai is definitely going to oblige him in the striking department. Sakai's Muay Thai base. He's got pretty quick hands for his size. He's got a solid kicking game as well. He is someone who will work in the clinch as well. I definitely do think the clinch work of Tuivasa or of Sakai is a little bit better. He's going to be the bigger guy as well. As far as frame goes, I do think he's probably got the bigger belly also. So I do think that, if this fight does take place in the clinch, I do think that Sakai's probably got a slight advantage. But, going back to Sakai real quick, he's got pretty shitty takedown defense. He's taken down pretty easily. If you're able to get him on his back, he's pretty lost there. So a little concerning for Sakai. But again, Tuivasa, I don't think has even shot a takedown. So this fight really should just play it on the feet. And, on the feet, it's a very interesting matchup. Both guys, I think, pretty similarly matched, but I definitely favor Sakai to be the slightly more technical striker, the guy throwing out a little more volume, the guy who's probably a little busier with his kicks as well. Tuivasa, he's got a very nasty leg kick, but I don't think he throws it out as much as Sakai. That said, though, Tuivasa definitely puts a lot more power in his shots than Sakai. So for that reason, Tuivasa probably going to be throwing a little bit less, but a little bit harder. Whereas with Sakai, we're going to see him throw maybe a little bit more, but with not as much power. So, Sakai probably going to be the more taking a more volume-based approach. But this is a pretty tough fight to break down. It'll really come down to what the judges are going to favor. But, if I had to pick a side, I think I might go with Sakai here. I think overall he's just probably the more, technical striker in there. I think his hand's probably a little bit quicker. And, over the course of 15 minutes, unless Tuivasa is able to just land a bomb on Sakai, I think Sakai should be able to win minutes here. And, Sakai is going to be the slightly bigger guy in there. I think that Sakai, like I said before, should be able to work in the clinch a little better than Tuivasa. So, if he needs to, I think he could get a bit of control time there. Work the knees and the elbows, rack up some points in the clinch as well. So I do slightly lean Sakai here. I do think that maybe he should be a slight favorite, maybe minus 130, minus 140 or so. So maybe there's a bit of value on Sakai here. Might actually bet him here out of pick him because I do think that he's the slightly better fighter. But, overall, this is going to be a pretty close fight. And I do think Tuivasa is live to land a bomb too. Sakai coming off of a pretty nasty knockout to Rosenstrike, so not sure how his chin's recovered from that, but assuming that Tuivasa doesn't get the knockout here, I do favor Sakai to win the decision. So official pick for me is going to be Sakai. I have him winning via decision. And moving along, we have Pedro Munhoz versus Dominick Cruz, and this is a pick'em, minus 110 both ways. So very interesting matchup and a pretty good matchmaking in my opinion. Two solid vets going at it, and we'll take a look at Cruz first. So, the guy's former champ, very unorthodox footwork in there and movement. He's very slick on the feet. He's really hard to get a good read on for his opponents, really hard to get the timing down with how awkward and unorthodox his movement is. I mean, he's made his career off of just his unorthodox and awkward movement, which I suspect is part of the reason why his joints are all fucked up. But yeah, he's very fluid on the feet, very slick there. And then, of course, the guy can wrestle as well. He does a great job of, mixing in the takedowns. He's got fantastic entries, really good timing on them. So yeah, the guy's just very high level, very well-rounded. And, he's a championship caliber fighter. It's just that, he's taken some time off. He's a little older in his career now, so we just don't know how big of a regression he's faced. And, since his return, his second return, he's gone up against Cejudo, the champ, and, not a fight I want to take too much from, not a fight that I think really reveals too much. The guy was coming in short notice that fight against the championship tier fighter after, such a long layoff, so the odds were definitely stacked against him there. But I do feel that we got a better look at where he was in his career in his most recent fight against Kenny, which, he looked pretty solid. Kenny, I think, is a decent, top 15 level fighter, and Cruz, I think, won somewhat comfortably against him. I know it says split decision, but I do feel that Cruz won that pretty clearly. I don't know how that was scored a split decision. So Cruz, I do think, still has it despite the long layoffs, the injuries, and the age. So I do think that Cruz is still a pretty solid fighter. I don't know if he's going to be, contending for the belt at this point in his career. But I don't think it'll matter too much for this matchup because he'll be going up against Pedro Munhoz, who is, at the tail end of his career also. And whereas Cruz, whereas with Munhoz, he's been a lot more active. Cruz has gotten a good amount of time off and is looking to start to get his reps in once again. But with Munhoz, I definitely classify him as more of like, top 5, top 10 gatekeeper, maybe top 5 at his best. Right now, he's probably like a decent top 10, top 15 guy at this point. But look, with Munhoz, I feel he's pretty easy to break down. He's, got a pretty straightforward style. He likes to move forward, likes to do damage. He's got a very nasty low leg kick and a very slick guillotine for when opponents look to shoot in. But overall, I just think he's a somewhat limited fighter. He's not like super layered with the striking or anything. He's just someone who's kind of reliant on his durability. He'll move forward, he'll take damage, but, he's got very good attritional work. So, he's able to just stay in your face and do damage. And then, if you get desperate, you shoot in on him, he'll just snatch up that guillotine, which, he's, super, super tight, one of his more well-known weapons in there. So, Munhoz, he's kind of a basic fighter, but, he does those few things very well. And, he fights to his strengths very well in there, despite, being, I think, not super athletic or anything. But yeah, this is a very interesting matchup in regards to, what both guys bring to the table. Cruz, I think, is, more light on his feet, lots of movement in there, lots of feints. Whereas with Munhoz, he's more plotty, pressure style sort of fighter, just throwing like very heavy leg kicks in there. So, stylistically, I think that it looks like it definitely favors Munhoz, right? We know that, with the leg kicks, very good at, stifling the movement of fighters who like to, rely on their footwork in there. And Munhoz is definitely a very effective leg kicker. But, the issue with that is, though, unless you're completely just hobbling the guy or you're just looking to finish him with leg kicks, it's just hard to really win, consistently like that, especially at the higher levels. And I do think that Cruz is at that level where he should, expect those leg kicks from Munhoz. He should look to either check them or just counter them. I mean, Aldo did a great job of checking those kicks. Obviously, Cruz, not that sort of fighter, but, he could probably take a page out of Aldo's book there. But, I do expect Cruz to be wary of those kicks, especially since it's such a big part of Munhoz's game. And it's just a big part of what counters Cruz in there. So I do expect Cruz to maybe look to game plan around that a little bit. But, going back to this matchup, I do think that on the feet, I definitely favor the striking of Cruz a little more. I think he's just overall the more skilled fighter. I think that he's got more minute-winning capability, honestly. Like, outside of the leg kicks, I don't know what else Munhoz is going to be able to offer for Cruz. And I do think that Cruz is good to hit takedowns as well. Munhoz has shown really good takedown defense. He's shown good get-ups. It's hard to hold someone like Munhoz down. And, of course, Munhoz does have a very slick guillotine, so Cruz is going to have to be careful of that. But I do think that if Cruz is, careful with his takedowns, watches his neck, he should be able to maybe hit a few takedowns, not get a ton of control time, but maybe do enough to keep Munhoz thinking on the feet. And then, if he is able to hit a takedown, it definitely will score well on the scorecards as well. So I'm going to go with Cruz here. I think that, it should be a pretty competitive fight, but I do think that Cruz should do enough on the feet to win on the cards. And then if he is able to mix in the wrestling as well, hit a couple takedowns, I think it should be able to help seal the deal for these rounds. But, I'd be lying to you if I wasn't concerned about the kicks, but I do think that Cruz should have a game plan to address those. So the pick for me is Cruz. I think he wins a pretty competitive decision here. And moving along, we have Dan Ige versus Josh Emmett, and Emmett's the minus 220 favorite. Come back on Ige is plus 185. So we'll start with Emmett first, and pretty straightforward breakdown with this guy. He's got fuck you power, and he has shown that he could put anyone out at any time in the fight. The guy's got serious knockout power in him. I mean, he's got a lot of early finishes, but he does have a few late finishes as well. Obviously the late finish against Michael Johnson, and he did have a couple late knockdowns against Burgos as well in his most recent fight. And that was a fight where Emmett had actually blown out his knee too. So the guy was hobbling on one knee and was still able to knock Burgos down a couple of times late in that fight. So the power definitely translates late into the fight. So the guy, he's super dangerous. He's super tough too. So A lot to like about this guy, but, you do have to consider that, he's going to be coming off of a year-long layoff after blowing out his knee. And then on top of that, he is 36, so definitely some concerns there. But outside of that, he's shown very good offensive striking, very dangerous. And, he did show in his most recent fight against Burgos that he can go 3 hard rounds, even on a blown-out knee. So, the guy is very solid offensively. And he'll be going up against Dan Ige, who, a very solid, well-rounded fighter himself. He could do a bit of everything. He's got decent boxing, can mix in the wrestling. He's got solid jiu-jitsu as well, which I do believe might actually be his base. That said, though, I don't think Ige's wrestling's that good. He's just someone who's been able to mix it in against maybe some lower-level guys. But overall, I think Ige's a bit of a decisionator. I don't think he's really elite anywhere. And, I have a feeling that, we have an idea of where his ceiling really is. He's got decent boxing, but, he's not good enough to really go up against the more technical or more dangerous strikers there in the division like Cater and the Zombie. And then I just don't think his jiu-jitsu is maybe at a high enough level to be going out there submitting guys. So, he's kind of relying on just mixing it all together to win these decisions. We've seen him do well against guys who are outside of the top 10, top 15. But, once he takes that step up, we've seen him struggle a bit. The Korean Zombie, Calvin Cater, and even to an extent Edson Barboza as well. So, we kind of know where his ceiling's at this point. And, at 30, I don't know if Ige is going to be making too many improvements. But, 30 years old, still got maybe a little left in the tank to make some improvements. But I don't think he's going to be going on like a crazy title run or anything. So this is a pretty tough fight for Ige. I think he's kind of outgunned on the feet. Emmett definitely going to be the heavier hitter. If he's landing, he's going to be landing the much more impactful shots. So I think for Ige to really have success in this fight, he's going to have to look to wrestle. Not that he won't have success on the feet. It's just that if, this plays out too long on the feet, I think that Ige is probably going to get hurt. We've seen Ige get hurt before. He's shown good recoverability. But, I think it's in Ige's best interest if he looks to get this fight to the ground and really limit some of the damage that Emmett's throwing out there. But Emmett's takedown defense is a little suspect, but, we haven't really seen him, go up against like high caliber wrestlers. We haven't even seen Emmett too much on his back, so it's kind of hard to say how that is going to play out for this fight. So, it's going to be kind of interesting there. But, if I'm Ige, I'm still not going to be put off by that. I'd still have to attack the wrestling because I think that's just going to be the best path to victory here for Ige. So, for this fight, I definitely think I'd have to go with Emmett here. I think that, on the feet, I think Emmett's got a pretty big advantage. If he's able to keep the fight standing, he could potentially knock Ige out. But if this goes to a decision and, this is a majority striking fight, he could definitely do enough damage to win a decision as well. But, this is an interesting fight because Emmett's coming off of a pretty long layoff, and you have to wonder, with the knee surgery and everything, how he's going to look, after that time off, if he's really been drilling that the grappling defense or even the grappling at all. And with Ige, I still actually think he's a decent fighter, and while I did say he's not particularly dangerous anywhere, I do think that he's a really tough, crafty sort of fighter who will hang in fights. So, if Emmett doesn't get the knockout, this fight could play out pretty closely, at least much closer than the line would imply. So, while I'm picking Emmett here to win, I think I might actually take a small bet on Ige just because I do feel the line is kind of wide. I do think that a lot of Emmett's win equity is kind of tied up in the knockout. I do think that Emmett can win a decision, but, I do think that if this gets stretched to decision, it might actually play out pretty close. So the pick is going to be Emmett for me, but I definitely think that Ige is going to be the value side. He's, very tough, very durable guy, very hard to put him away. So I do think that Ige has got it in him to maybe squeeze out 2 of the 3 rounds. But as far as a pure pick goes, I'm just going to go with Josh Emmett. And in the next fight, we have Sean O'Malley versus Raulian Paiva. O'Malley's the minus 280 favorite. Come back on Paiva is plus 240. And we'll start with Paiva first. So I'll be honest with you guys. I'm not high on Paiva whatsoever. I think the guy's a bit of a fraud. I really just don't think the guy is all that skilled. He's super durable and he will move forward. But overall, I just don't think he's that good of a fighter. Back at 125, I felt he was a bit of a size bully. And overall, I just don't really think he's that good anywhere. But, I do have to hand it to him. The guy is super tough. He will continue to move forward and look to just maybe outwork you if you start to slow down. And I feel that Paiva got a real lucky decision against Phillips in his last fight. I definitely think that Phillips 10-8'd Paiva in that first round. But not only that, I think Phillips fought a terrible game plan after that first round too. He was throwing a lot of big movements in there and kind of threw the fight away in the latter 2 rounds. I think that if Phillips was, conserved his energy a little more, fought a little more smartly in just one of those last 2 rounds, he could very easily have gotten a 29-28. But realistically, it should have been a tie anyways. But going back to Paiva here, I just don't think the guy really is that good. He's just super durable, and he's been able to get away with it so far. I don't know if that'll be the case here in this fight. He'll be going up against Sean O'Malley, who, I think is a legit offensive striker. And say what you will about O'Malley, but, the guy is a legit offensive striker. He's got very crisp boxing in there. He's got good movement on the feet. He's good defensively. He's got good footwork. He's good at feinting. And he's just overall a very dynamic, very dangerous striker. He's got good timing and accuracy, and he will throw in some spinning attacks for good measure as well. Really, the only knock on the guy so far has just been his durability. And that is definitely a concern going into all of his fights into the future. You can't really shake the image of him just hobbling around in there against Sukumtat and then more recently against Chito Vera. So definitely a durability concern. But, outside of that, I don't think the guy's shown too many weaknesses. You could maybe argue his defensive grappling, but, he hasn't really fought anyone that I would consider a strong offensive grappler. So it's kind of hard to say in that regards. He's been getting a lot of, favorable matchups when it comes to, being matched up with strikers, being matched up with low-level guys. And, you can't really blame him. The UFC's definitely trying to slow cook him here, trying to build him up. And, the guy, I think, is pretty popular. And, he's playing his cards right, honestly. He's running through these lower-level guys. He's cashing checks, cashing, fight of the night bonuses or performance of the night bonuses. So you can't really hate the guy for doing that. But going back to this matchup, I think that O'Malley should just absolutely style on Paiva here. I think O'Malley's levels above Paiva on the feet. I think he should be able to touch Paiva up. As long as O'Malley learned from, Phillips' mistakes his last fight, I think that O'Malley should be able to pace himself a lot better. O'Malley's cardio is, I think, way better than Phillips's anyways. And I do think that O'Malley's a better striker. So I think that O'Malley should honestly just be able to stay on the outside and just piece up Paiva. I don't know if he's going to be able to knock Paiva out. I mean, Paiva was on death's door against Phillips after that first round and was still able to pull it together those final 2 rounds. So Paiva is super tough. Not sure if O'Malley's going to get him out of there. But I do think that O'Malley's going to put on a pretty dominant performance. I don't think that Paiva is really much of a threat anywhere. I don't think that Paiva is going to be able to take O'Malley down and submit him. I don't think that Paiva's a high-level submission guy. And then on the feet, I definitely favor O'Malley much more. And, I don't think that Paiva's style of just being able to move forward, take shots, and do more is going to be enough to beat O'Malley here. He's kind of just a much better version of Chris Moutinho, honestly. He's going to be taking damage from O'Malley and just continue and just look to move forward. Maybe he won't eat as many punches as Moutinho, but I do think that O'Malley should be able to do work. And honestly, just short of O'Malley getting injured, I don't think that Paiva's got much of a chance. So I'm going to go with O'Malley here. Might just stick him in a couple parlays. Won't go too big on it just because I do feel that, the injury concerns are definitely legit. And I don't know if there's too many other big favorites on the card I'm looking to parlay up. So I think O'Malley should win this pretty dominantly. Knockout might be in the cards, but, Paiva's super tough, so maybe not. Maybe just look to play O'Malley decision or O'Malley, point spread. I think that might be a good bet if you've got access to it. But the pick here is going to be O'Malley. I think he gets it done fairly easily. And in the next fight, we have Kai Kara-France versus Cody Garbrandt. And Garbrandt's going to be the -160 favorite. Come back on Kara-France is +140. And we'll start with him first. So France, he's a solid striker. He's got good volume. He's got decent power, but, I do consider him more of a decision guy. He does have, he is actually coming off of a knockout and he does have a number of knockouts on the regionals and early in his UFC career, but, I just don't know if I don't know if I'd really consider him a power puncher. He's got decent output. He's got decent volume. He's got a nice jab, nice footwork in there. He's very technical, one of the more technical strikers in the division. He's fought some good competition as well. So all around, I do like Cachoeira France. He's a solid, I think, top 10, top 15 sort of fighter. I'm not sure if he's quite at the upper echelon just yet. I just don't think he's really, particularly dangerous. He's got good striking and stuff, but, I don't know if his game's well-rounded enough either for that. But, he's definitely still got potential. I do think he's still somewhat young in his career, so he could still be making improvements. But with that being said, I do feel this is a pretty solid test for Garbrandt to see where he's at this stage in his career. He's going to be moving down to 125, making his flyweight debut. And I definitely do think that this is going to be a good test for Garbrandt. Garbrandt, he's a striker as well. He's got very quick hands. He's got big power. I definitely do think he's got knockout upside in this fight. He's got good movement in there, good kicks. But, the issue with him has really always been his willingness to just engage in a brawl. And his durability is definitely suspect as well. So a big concern there, especially, when he starts to throw down with his opponents. We saw him be a little more composed in his Assunção fight, and up until the knockout, it was actually a pretty low volume, pretty close affair. And we saw him look a little more measured against Font, but he was pretty much just getting pieced up that fight. But honestly, it's just really hard to get a good read on Garbrandt. Like, the guy's good for sure, and at one point he was the champ, but since then he's gone 1-4, and that one win being against Assunção, who, is a decent fighter, but, that was a very low output affair, was very close up until he hit that knockout. And, had that fight gone all 3 rounds, it would have been a pretty close fight. And, at this point, I feel that Assunção's possibly on his way out too. I don't think the guy, at this stage in his career is really all that good. So, decent win for Garbrandt there, but, he's got 4 losses mixed in there as well. And I'll be honest, it just does not look like Garbrandt's really looked all that good in his past few fights. It seems like he might have even regressed a little bit. You could say he's fighting some really good fighters, but, he's pretty much got pieced up by Font for all 5 rounds, really had no answer for him. And then, of course, he's got 3 other losses by finish as well. So, definitely concerned about the trajectory of Garbrandt's career. And this move down to 125 definitely feels like Garbrandt's trying to salvage that a little bit. I do feel that 125 is probably Garbrandt's more natural weight class. So it'll be interesting to see how he looks down here. This is a pretty tough fight to call just because there are a lot of variables mainly surrounding Garbrandt. I do think he's a good, solid striker. And, him moving down to 125, I'm just curious to see how the cut's going to look, how his chin's going to hold up, honestly. Like, the guy's chin is definitely a little suspect. And, him having to cut that extra 10 pounds could be a bit detrimental in that regards. And then, there are some other factors with Garbrandt moving down as well. Like, I think he'll actually have the size advantage here, which usually he does not. So, very curious to see how that's going to play out. And then, of course, just the speed in general for Garbrandt. He's usually the quicker fighter in there. Now that he's moving down to 125, I don't know if that's going to be as apparent. It's hard to say. Cachoeira France, I don't think he's particularly fast or anything. But, there's going to be a lot of new dynamics in this fight, for Garbrandt that, it's hard to get a real good read on. But, just taking a look at this matchup, it's, again, very tough to call because, we saw Garbrandt really struggle with the jab of Font, and Cachoeira France definitely has a really solid jab. He's got very good technique, very good footwork, and that could definitely give Garbrandt troubles. But, I do think Garbrandt's probably going to be the heavier hitter. Garbrandt's fought, much bigger guys, probably better guys as well. So I do have to favor that for Cody. But, yeah, man, this move down has just really got me scratching my head in terms of, just getting a read on this fight. But I think maybe I'll go with Garbrandt here. I think that this is a decent step down in competition. And, for once, Garbrandt won't be fighting someone, bigger than him. I do believe Cachoeira France might have the reach advantage, actually. But as far as, like, the height and stuff goes, I do think that Garbrandt is a little bigger. So yeah, I think I'm gonna pick Garbrandt here to win, but not super confident. And just taking a look at everything, I do think that Cachoeira France might just be the value side. Plus 140s, I think a nice juicy number for Cachoeira France, especially since we just don't know how Cody's gonna look, after the weight cut and everything, moving down to 125. So I'm gonna go with Garbrandt here very tentatively, but I definitely do feel that Cachoeira France might just be the value side here. And in the next fight, we have Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Jeff Neal. And this is a pick'em, minus 110 both ways. And apparently, Neal just got arrested for a DUI and weapon charges. But more importantly, I think the fight is still on, according to the UFC. And overall, I don't know if it's anything super serious. Obviously, it's bad. It's a DUI, but it looks like it's just, your run-of-the-mill holiday DUI sort of charge. I don't think he was going over to his in-laws to shoot him up or anything. So I think Neal is he's out of jail now, I think. And supposedly he's going to be on target to fight next week. So I guess that's good news. But, we're here to break down this fight. So we'll take a look at Neal first since we're already talking about him. So Neal, very heavy hands in there. He likes to move forward and pressure opponents. He's not afraid to get into a brawl with his opponents, because he's pretty tough in there and, he does hit pretty hard. So he's pretty confident that, he'll end up landing the heavier shots and getting out of there ahead of his opponents. He's got good offensive boxing. He's got a very sneaky head kick as well. Overall, just a very dangerous offensive striker, but, I do think he's a little one-dimensional. He's done well against other brawlers in there who will stand in front of him, but it does look like he will struggle against more technical fighters like, Magny or Thompson, who are able to either just out-grapple him or just, stay on the outside and just pick him apart. And even to a certain extent, someone like Bilal Muhammad was able to give Neal some trouble on the feet. I know Neal did win that fight. He did drop Bilal a couple of times there, but I did feel that Bilal was probably the more technical striker. And, I felt that Neal, the athleticism and power of Neal really was what won him that fight, and not so much because, he was a much better technical boxer or anything in there. But overall, I do think that Neal is a really solid offensive striker who's super dangerous in there. And he'll be going up against Ponzinibbio, who is a really high-paced pressure fighter himself. He's very active offensively, likes to get in his opponent's face, make it a very pressure-heavy fight, likes to just unload on him. He's a very dynamic offensive striker, honestly, just a lot of fun to watch. Offensively, he's very good. Even after all the health scares, he's looked pretty good since his return. But, I do think it's pretty obvious that, he's not the fighter that he once was, since his time off. He's still pretty solid, though. He put on a great performance against Baeza. He did get starched pretty early against Gillian, but, that was his first fight back, so it's hard to really take too much from that fight. But, again, he looked good against Baeza, although, he was taking a bit of damage that fight, so a little concerning there. I don't think Baeza is, the best fighter. I do think Baeza is up and coming, but, fighting that closely with Baeza, while, he did put on a good performance, did leave me a little concerned going forward with Ponzinibbio. But taking a look at this matchup, I do think that stylistically, I think it favors Neal. I do think that Ponzinibbio is probably the better striker. He's more experienced. But again, I favor Neal in terms of the stylistics here, just because I think that Neal tends to thrive against fighters who are happy to kind of just trade with him in the pocket, fighters who are primarily like stand-up guys. Ponzinibbio, while he's good offensively, doesn't really have the footwork and the movement of someone like Wonder Boy, like Stephen Thompson. He's not really a grappler either, so he's not going to be able to just hold Neal up against the cage. He's not going to be able to take him down. So this is primarily going to be just a boxing affair, I think. So I think we're going to see a lot of exchanges. And, while Ponzinibbio is good offensively, he's someone who is, I'd say, somewhat hittable. I took a lot of damage against Baeza, and I don't know if he's going to be able to take that sort of damage and punishment from someone like Neal. I think that, in prolonged exchanges, I think that Neal could probably hurt Ponzinibbio. And even if Neal isn't able to get Ponzinibbio out of there, I think that he should be able to do enough damage to likely win on the cards. I like the output of Ponzinibbio, but, again, with how much he moves forward, he is going to be pretty susceptible to taking damage. So, I like Jeff here. I think that Neil could do a bit of damage to Ponzinibbio, honestly. Even if he isn't able to get Ponzinibbio out of there, I think he'll be landing just the much heavier shots. I think he could hurt Ponzinibbio, maybe get, some knockdowns. He might even bloody up the face of Ponzinibbio. So optics-wise, I think that it'll favor Neil. And, I just think Neil's going to be doing a lot more damage in there. But Ponzinibbio is still a solid fighter, but I think at this stage in their careers, I do favor Neil a little bit more. But of course, we do have the added concern of the DUI now. I don't know what the guy's been doing this past week now, so I don't know if this is going to affect his weight cut, if it's affected his training at all. So that's just another layer of concern. But assuming that hasn't had too big of an impact, I think that Neil, if he's on form, should be able to win a pretty competitive decision, or possibly just get the knockout. But I'm going to go with the decision here. Ponzinibbio is pretty tough. I think he survives, but he's going to end up taking a lot of damage. So I'm going to go with Neil to win via decision here. And in the co-main event, we have Amanda Nunes versus Juliana Pena. Nunes is the -800 favorite. Comeback on Pena is +550. And I'll keep this short since I feel like there's really not much to break down here. Pena's coming off of a one-fight win streak, and now she's getting a title shot. I think that really says all there needs to say about this matchup. I mean, even prior to her one-fight win streak, it was a loss to Germaine de Randamie via guillotine against de Randamie, who, she's a kickboxer, and, she's getting subbed by a kickboxer. Just not a good look at all. And then, she's able to pull off a submission win against Sarah McMahon, who is 40 years old, and everyone's subbing Sarah McMahon. So, congratulations, I guess. But I just think that Pena is completely outmatched here. Nunes is literally just a better version of Pena everywhere. She's a better striker. She's a better grappler. She's got better wrestling. She's a better athlete, just all around, all across the board, a better fighter. So really not much else to say here. I mean, if you just look at pictures of the two, Nunes just straight up looks like a juiced up version of Pena. And then on top of that, she's just a more skilled fighter too. So really, I think Nunes has got Pena covered here. I don't see how Nunes loses this outside of, Nunes blowing her knee out or something. And even then, it'd probably still be a pretty competitive fight. So I think Nunes wins this. Obviously, the question is if she's going to get it done inside the distance or if she's going to play with her food a little bit. I think Nunes gets it done. Pena's been talking a lot of trash. I think Nunes is going to maybe look to make a statement here. And real quick, if you just look at the opponents that Nunes has beaten by decision, just really quickly here, Felicia Spencer, who, as it turns out, is probably one of the most durable fighters in the division. And that was basically just an absolute stomp of a fight. Spencer never really had a shot that fight. And then GDR, probably one of the better, well, definitely the best striker in the division. Nunes probably just played it a little safe there, didn't want to overextend. And then, of course, her fight against Shevchenko, arguably, the female GOAT outside of Nunes. She's going to decision with very high-level fighters and Felicia Spencer. I just don't think Pena's at that caliber, and I don't think Pena's got that sort of durability to survive the 5 rounds. So I'm going to go with Nunes to win inside the distance. I think she probably finds the submission, maybe in the 2nd or 3rd round or something. So, I'm going to go with Nunes here. I think she wins via round 3 submission. And in the main event, we have Charles Oliveira versus Dustin Poirier. And Poirier is the -175 favorite. Come back on Oliveira is +150. And so we'll start with the challenger, Poirier, also the betting favorite coming into this fight. The guy's a very high-level striker. He's got good volume, very high work rate, can definitely push a pace, and is definitely, I'd say, one of the more durable fighters in the division. He's got solid cardio, and, overall has just fought just some of the best guys in the division. Probably could have gotten the title fight earlier, but decided to cash a couple easy paychecks against McGregor, just get the money fights. But, overall, just a very solid offensive boxer who's, very durable, very tough, and can push a phenomenal pace. So a lot of good things to say about him, but there are concerns as well about Poirier, and the main one being the fact that he's just taken a lot of damage. He's actually, I'd say, kind of hittable as well. He's been in a lot of wars, and this was a concern I had going into the Conor fights. I thought that going into those fights, Poirier had just, I believe, come off of a war against Hooker, and even before that, he's taken a lot of damage. He took quite a bit of damage against Gaethje as well. So I do still think that's a bit of a concern, even though he's more or less taken about a year off. He basically came out of those fights kind of unscathed. He did admit that Conor hurt him a little bit early in that first fight, but overall, I feel like he hasn't taken too much damage this past year. So definitely a plus for him, but I still have some questions about potential durability concerns, especially since he'll be going up against Oliveira, who I think is a very, very dangerous explosive striker in there. Obviously, he's known for his jiu-jitsu, very high level, very slick on the ground, but the guy is super dangerous on the feet as well. He's very technical on the ground, or very technical on the feet. He definitely can get a little wild, just throw like jumping kicks and stuff. But, he can keep it technical at times. And, he's very accurate, very dangerous, very precise with his striking. And on top of that, Oliveira's actually got very solid wrestling as well. You don't see that a lot from these guys who are, very high-level jiu-jitsu guys. They're usually just looking to chuck bombs in there, close the distance, and then clinch up with you. But Oliveira's actually got, pretty solid wrestling. And then, of course, the guy's very high-level on the ground as well, a submission specialist. He just flows there on the ground. He's great in transitions. And I do think that, if this fight does hit the ground, he's very much live for the submission. So, Oliveira is a very dangerous fighter, on the feet or on the ground. And, the big knock on Oliveira has been, the cardio and the durability and the heart. I feel like that's a pretty big narrative going into a lot of his fights previously, and possibly will be a pretty big narrative going into this fight. But I definitely think that Oliveira's kind of addressed that a little bit. In his most recent fight against Chandler, Chandler had him hurt bad in that first round, and he was able to get on a single, recover, and eventually claw his way back into that fight. So while I don't think this completely dispels all of the concerns with his durability or his heart, I do think that he's shown that he could fight through a bit of adversity, and I do think that it's something he's addressed a little bit here. That said, though, I do feel that if this fight does get extended into the latter rounds, I do think that Poirier is going to start, pulling away. He's going to be able to start pouring it on Oliveira, and I do think that Poirier is going to be live for the finish later in the fight, largely due to the fact that I think Oliveira will start to slow down. Oliveira has a very explosive fight style. He's super dangerous early in the fight, but, he will start to fade. And when that happens, I do think that Poirier is live for the finish, but I don't think Oliveira is going to quit in there. I think it'll probably be like a mercy, like TKO stoppage or something. I do think that now that the stakes have been raised, this is a title fight. I do think that Oliveira is going to, he's going to gut it out. I don't know if he's going to look to quit in there, but I don't know if this fight is even going to make it that far. I really think that Oliveira's got a very good chance of finding the finish early. I mean, the guy's on a 9-fight win streak, and 8 of those were by finish. And the only guy he wasn't able to get the finish against was fucking Tony Ferguson, who had his arm bent the other way. And, that fight should have been stopped, but, Tony Ferguson's not going to tap in there. So, ended up winning a very dominant decision. But, you have to give the guy credit for, getting that many finishes in all of his fights. So I definitely do feel that Oliveira is being a little overlooked here. I didn't give him the most credit on his run when it did happen, but, going back and watching a lot of those fights, they were really impressive wins. Poirier definitely fought, the higher level guys, but, he's fought at the UFC level for quite a bit, and he's running through these guys. So, it's not like he's fighting competitively with, these scrubs, essentially. He's beaten very high level guys in Chandler, Kevin Lee even, and then, he's finishing these mid-level guys like Gordon, Lentz, Miller, all these mid-level guys in pretty dominant fashion. So I do think that Oliveira has shown that he's an upper echelon fighter, and so is Poirier. I mean, Poirier's fought some really good fighters in there, and he's been doing it for a pretty long time. So I think this is a somewhat straightforward fight. I think that Oliveira is super live to win in the early rounds. I'd say maybe the first 2.5 rounds, I think Oliveira is live to find the finish, but, should this fight get extended, I definitely favor Poirier quite a bit in the latter rounds. I think that, Oliveira with his fight style, very, very high energy expenditure. And if he isn't able to get Poirier out of there, I think Poirier can start just pouring it on him and eventually find the TKO finish. But as far as an official pick goes, I'm going to go with Oliveira here. I think that he's just a super dangerous fighter. I think he's going to find the chin of Poirier. I think he could either knock Poirier out or just submit him, club and tub situation, or if this fight does somehow end up on the ground, I think that Oliveira could find the submission as well. Poirier, he's shown good durability throughout his career, but, he has been hurt before. He has been knocked out before. So, while he's got very good durability, the guy's not indestructible, and he is going up against a very dangerous, very athletic fighter in Oliveira. So I'm going to go with Oliveira here. I think he gets it done in round 2 via submission. I might just place a unit on Oliveira here. Might just take him inside the distance as well, and maybe put a little bit on the submission prop as well, because I do think that the submission is probably more live than the knockout, because I do feel that if he hurts Poirier, he might just look for a submission, but I do think that if he's able to take Poirier down, he could probably find the submission as well. So I like Oliveira here, and something I do want to mention real quick is Poirier mentions bringing this into deep waters, looking to drown Oliveira, but you're gonna have to get there, and I feel that with that sort of game plan, we might see Poirier maybe start a little slow, be a little more defensive and look to just extend the fight, but I don't know if that's something you want to do against Oliveira. If you give him room to operate, he's going to start snowballing, and if you don't make Oliveira respect you early, he's going to start to just he starts going to pull ahead. And again, someone like Oliveira, as dangerous as he is, I don't know if you want to start off too slow. So just a little tidbit of information there. Not sure what Dustin's approach really is going to be in this fight, but I do think that if he starts slow, it could be in a bit of trouble. But overall, I'm going to go with Poirier, or not Poirier. I'm going to go with Oliveira here, and official pick is round 2 submission.